Hello everyone, it's Krishna. I have about 13 years of work experience and mostly been a back-end developer for a lot of time, but recently I've been more working towards database as a database engineer, database architect, as well as some interest in AI and machine learning. So today, in today's presentation, we'll be focusing on Snowflake. So now Snowflake is a data warehouse which is built on top of cloud. Now, so there are two terms, data warehouse and cloud. So what is a data warehouse? So data warehouse is basically a central repository where data of different types from different sources can be stored, and they can be then utilized for doing analysis. Now, analysis may include creating reports, doing different data pipelines for AI or machine learning, or simply to move it to the operational databases. And by cloud, it means that Snowflake is totally developed on cloud infrastructure. It doesn't have any its own file system. Also, Snowflake cannot be installed on premises, and it cannot be on a private cloud. Okay. So why Snowflake used cloud as its infrastructure? So I think this is the most important feature that Snowflake has, which made it such successful product. But Snowflake is not the only data warehouse that works on cloud. There are a lot of different, including AWS, Redshift, EMR, even IBM DB2 and Azure is also providing their own data warehouses, which can be hosted on cloud. So how Snowflake is different than that? So one thing that one important feature that makes Snowflake uh, stand out against rest of them is its unique architecture. And as in this presentation, we will be mostly focusing on that architecture of the Snowflake. So any data warehouse or a presentation on Snowflake will require a lot of different presentations. It would not be possible to shows everything in just 15 and 20 minutes. That's why we are trying to only focus on its architecture, which is unique uh, in this domain, in the cloud data warehouse domain. So few points here, like as I mentioned, why it selected the cloud, because cloud has one important native feature that not other in-premises, yeah, on-premises uh, file systems have, and that is scalability and durability. It's scalable in the means that it has infinite resources, and durable that it is guaranteed to be available 99.9%. That is something that most of the cloud providers provide as part of their SLA, whether it's AWS or Azure. Another important feature that Snowflake has is that it's data cloud provider agnostic. It's not dependent on any specific cloud provider. Currently, it provides its services either on Azure or AWS as its platform. But in the future, they also will be providing on the Google Cloud provider. Currently, I think it's still in progress, and only Azure and AWS is something that is available for commercial use. So these are the points, like it's a zero management, it's a managed data warehouse as a service product, or we can store all our data into Snowflake. It doesn't, basically it integrates the different systems that are involved in database management, which include data warehouse, data lake, or data marts. So all of them have some specific features that make them different from each other, and that's why Snowflake tried to integrate all of them So we can store all different types of data, whether it's a structured data, semi-structured data, non-structured data, or IoT data. In any type of data that we are getting from our resources, we can store in the Snowflake. And there is no logical division or way of thinking that we need a different data system for that. The second part is, yeah, all of your users. So again, it is scalable and it can scale to any number of user support and resources. One important feature is pay only for what you use. Now, this is again based on the cloud. It's not that the Snowflake provides anything different. It's based on the cloud provider, but it comes with a twist is how the architecture of the Snowflake is. And that's why its costing is much cheaper than one of its competitor, which is AWS Redshift. Redshift is purely based on AWS as its platform, but Snowflake can either utilize Azure or AWS, but its architecture also provide us the feature where we can basically divide or separate out the compute and the storage. Okay. Now, this is about the architecture of the data warehousing. Now, all the traditional architectures that we have, this include the cloud architecture of AWS Redshift and EMR. So they are either based on shared disk or shared nothing. Now, by shared disk, it means that, so basically we are talking about distributed computing or massively parallel processing architecture. Here we have n number of nodes. Now, nodes are basically a term for, you can say, a computer, which will have its own processing memory or RAM or a CPU or a disk. So in a MPP architecture, we have n number of nodes which are clubbed together in a cluster. Now, in a shared disk, all our data is stored in a collection of hard disks, and then they are shared by different processors or nodes in the cluster. So it was one of the earlier uh, algorithm that was used, but it was not scalable, and that's why a few years back, or you can say 10 years back, the industry moved into shared nothing or a decentralized architecture. In the shared nothing architecture, each node has its own memory, its CPU, as well as its own disk. So there is a very minimum communication or external communication between the disks, between the nodes. So what it means is, say you have a data of, say, of size 1 terabyte, and you have, say, 1000 nodes in a cluster. So how we do is we shard the data or partition the data, and each node will have a subset of that data. They will do the processing independently of any other disk. And so it is much faster, it is much scalable. Like 1000 nodes is not good enough for you, then you add another, say, 1000 nodes. So all the remaining nodes remain unaffected and you can increase your compute power. But it also came with a drawback. And that drawback is your data needs to be repartitioned. If you add, you change your cluster size. It's basically called cluster resizing, and that is something we need to do regularly if we have to increase or decrease our compute power. Like I mentioned, you have 1 terabyte of data and you have, say, 1000 nodes. So you partition the data accordingly. Now, if you add another 1000 nodes, then what you have to do is you have to again repartition that data so that each node gets a it's uniquely distributed on or uniformly distributed on each of the node. Now, this repartitioning is a or resizing is a very costly operation, and there are two things that affect it. One is that during this repartition, all your queries will either fail or they will remain in a queue till the resizing completes. And uh, the second problem that comes with is that you cannot uh, independently size your nodes. It again depends on the how much data you have and how much partition data that would be stored in your node. So again, there is a coupling between the your data as well as your compute power. So in 2014 and 15, around that time, Snowflake came with its unique architecture. It's called multi-clustered shared data. Now, what it means is that it combines the two things, as you see in the left, shared disk and shared nothing. And how it does, let me show you next. Okay. So in this, your data remains as a separate collection of disks. So you have, say, 1 terabyte of data. It is divided into micro partitions and stored on a storage device. Now, here comes an interesting point. Snowflake didn't provide its own file system. It leveraged the cloud. So in the beginning, it was only AWS that was supported. So let me give an example of that. So whenever we ingest some data, a huge amount of data, so Snowflake will load that data, will optimize it, compress it, convert into column format, and then store that data in S3 storage. It doesn't have its own file system. It uses the AWS S3. So advantage with S3 is that it's unlimited data space that you get. So you can store any amount of data. And the second thing is you can store any type of data because it's a blob object and you can either store structured, unstructured, binary data or any type of data, and it will not have any effect on that. So this is how the data is stored. Now, the second part is the query processing, or you can say the each node's compute. Now here again, it uses Snowflake uses the cloud providers EC2 instances, for example, for the AWS. So what it does is for each node, it creates a collection of EC2 instances, which will have its own SSD memory as well as compute processor. And they will share that. So each node will share the data from the same S3 collection, and it will do the processing. Now, again, if you see this, you will think that it's the same shared disk architecture, but there is one difference. And that difference is that whenever the first time the compute processor access the data from S3, which is called the cold data, it do the IO from the external S3, load that data into each of the nodes local hard disks or SSD drives. The next time, if we query the same data or we execute the same query, if it finds that query in their local hard disk, it doesn't call the S3 bucket. And in that case, it executes from its local hard drive. Now here you can think of it as a shared nothing architecture. So if you are doing subsequent queries, or if you fetch, say, all the records from a table and then do some filter on that, do some aggregation group by, then in that case, there will no call to the external source, and all the processing will be done on the local SSD drives. So here it has a benefit of shared nothing architecture. So it's a hybrid model. It uses shared disk as well as shared nothing architecture. Now, these virtual workhouse or VWH, these are the EC2 instances, so they use a different term for that, VWH. So they are not persistent. And once the processing is done, and if, say, it's idle for 10 minutes, they automatically shut down or move into a suspend status. During that period, all the caching of the data is lost. Now, whenever you restart the your workhorse, again, it will go fetch the data from the persistent S3 storage and load it in the local cache. So it doesn't require a lot of effort to keep that cache, because the one of the issue with cache is that cache becomes invalidated very quickly. So it tries to minimize that. Now, still it can become invalidated if the S3 is updated with a new set of data. So there are different techniques that we can utilize. But on the high level, this is how they separate out their processing as well as the database storage. Now, the third is, you can see at the top is the cloud services. Now, these are the database storage and query processor are two important aspects of your Snowflake. But what makes it a truly database is its cloud services. So these cloud services are set of services which also run on EC2 instances, but they have very specific work. And it is that which binds different processors with your S3 buckets. It keeps the session, it keeps the information about authentication and access control. It also optimizes how the queries will be executed. So all these things are done in a separate layer, which are cloud services. And again, these are all again executed on different EC2 instances. So again, there is nothing that Snowflake provides out of its, neither the compute nor the storage. It leverages the underlying cloud provider. In Azure case, the database storage would be the Azure blob container. The query processor would be the virtual machines that the Azure provides. Okay, so these are the same thing, the database storage. It's basically when the data is loaded in Snowflake, Snowflake reorganizes data into its optimized, compresses columnar format, and then stores that in a cloud storage. Query processing, again, the same is queries using virtual warehouses. Each virtual house is a MPP compute cluster. MPP is massively parallel processing architecture that basically all of the data warehouses uses. Yes. And then the cloud services is a collection of the services. Okay. Now, before moving on this, let me show you something regarding that shared architecture, shared and shared nothing architecture, or the hybrid architecture. Okay. So few things first, let me show you. Okay. Now, data can be loaded or unloaded into or unloaded from Snowflake only through an integration with an cloud provider. So if you want to load a huge amount of data into Snowflake, you need to connect it with an S3 bucket. Now, suppose this is an AWS account of your account, and Snowflake will create the cloud provider based on its own credentials. So there are two AWS accounts we are talking about. One is the Snowflake's internal account, which it creates once we provision a Snowflake cluster. And this is, suppose it's your company's own AWS account. Now, I have two sets of data here. One is this is a sample data set. It's not the real data. It's code station and then the CSV file. Now, the CSV file is a much larger. It's about 2.2 GB in the size, but this JSON is very small. It's about 20 MB. And it's something very simple data that I just want to showcase you. Now, you suppose that you have a JSON file. Now, just JSON is considered more of a hierarchical data structure. It's not structured data. It's basically a semi-structured data. Now, for other data warehouses, they do not have the first a very good integration with JSON data. I was working with Amazon Redshift recently, and we had an issue where our vendors were providing data in JSON. And we wanted, that data was very large. Most of the JSON files were more than 10 GB, and there were about thousands of such files. Each day the vendors were providing to us. Now we wanted to, so we had a requirement where we need to load that JSON data into our Amazon Redshift. But Amazon Redshift does process JSON, but it has some peculiar requirements, like it needs to be in this specific format, and those things that would take a lot of time if we process about, say, 500 GB of data every day. So what we needed to do in that scenario, what our pipeline was doing, that we downloaded that JSON file on an EC2 instance, unzipped it, converted into a CSV format, then zipped it, and then uploaded back to the S3 bucket. And then Amazon Redshift was able to extract that, load that data by copy command from the CSV file. So this was an extra effort that was required. And again, it was also error prone because since it's a semi-structured data, sometimes you might miss some of the fields, and then you have to do a lot of checks here and there. So that's why we try to move on the Snowflake. So let me show like, so suppose that I have this data and I want to load this JSON data in our Snowflake. So first you have to do is basically create a table that will store that data. Now, since these are not columns, these are all objects. So we can use something like a variant data type. Okay, so this raw JSON data table is created. Now, these are the things that I will not show. I will just explain because it requires integrating Snowflake with the external AWS account. So what we need to do if we want to load some data, we have to create an storage integration first. This is basically would be linking the external AWS with the Snowflake AWS. So it's a cross Snowflake account that we want to integrate. So first step was to create that storage integration. We can name it and we define the ARN number and what are the locations. Like this is the SF data loading. So this is the SF data loading bucket that we have. Then the next step is to create the format. Now for us, if we want to reuse some of the format, like for JSON, we need to create a file format. And the third step is to create a stage. Now the stage is where we integrate file format, the URL and storage integration. Now this stage can be used. So if you say work with data warehouses, you would know that staging is uh, a part in the data warehouse where you load the raw data and then do the further ETL and ELT process on top of that. So stage is the same thing. This will help us to load the raw data. Now, so these steps are already executed. So I only need to do this. So I copy into the table that I created from this location. Should not take much time because it's just now something went wrong. Yeah, that happens. Okay, so something went wrong here and that's why you're not seeing, but yeah, believe me, it works. Okay, so this is the basic way how we load data. It requires some of the pre-processing steps to do, and then we can load the data. So let me show you the CSV. I will not load this because it's about 2.2 GB of data, and it's about 22 million records that were inserted in this table. So this is sales table. Let me show you the next step where we one thing I need to do is I need to okay, so it should always be so based on that CSV, I created a table called sales and I execute a query. So we get that data. If we go and see its query plan. Okay, so again, what it's doing is because I executed few minutes ago, it used the cache. So there are two types of cache. One, as I mentioned, that whenever the data is extracted from the S3, we store it in the local hard disk. Then the second is the whatever the result is there, it is also cached. So next time we execute the same query, it will basically cache the result. It will not even hit our local hard disk. So that's why it's very fast, came in just about 100% is the result reuse. Let me go and try to suspend it. So hopefully when we suspend it and then resume, it will remove all the cache. Still came fast. Okay, I can go to the history. Yeah. So in the history, you can see this was the second time I executed that query. So the percentage scanned from the cache was 100%. Now this cache was coming from the local hard disk. I executed that query, then it didn't hit the S3 bucket. If I go into history and go first query, no, even not this one. So yeah, this was the initial one when the disk IO was there. Right? You can see that table scan was 1.6%. The first time it hit the S3 or the cold data. Now, why Snowflake? Again, because two things it provides. One is the unlimited scaling, and the second is the costing. As compared to other data warehouses, cloud data warehouses, which charge, even for the storage, they need to charge for the compute because they are shared nothing architecture, and your data that is stored in the hard disk is along with a along on a EC2 instance, which also has compute. So they will charge for the EC2 instance. But with the Snowflake, the data, the persistent data is only on the S3. So they will be charging you based on the S3 charges. Now, those are much less as compared to compute or EC2 instances. So only time when you are running the queries, so if within 24 hours, if you run your queries 4 or 5 hours a day, then for those 4 and 5 hours, you would be charged for your EC2 instances. And for the rest of the time, you would be charged for the storage. That is the S3 cost. That is much less as compared to the EC2 instances. So that is costing. Now it's fully automated. By this, it means that as a user of Snowflake, I do not need to do anything. I do not need to install any software or do any infrastructure. Even like if my data requirement increases or my compute requirement use increases, we do not have to go and provision any extra hardware or anything from the cloud. It will do automatically. It will basically check that now it's time that you requires to scale yourself, then it will automatically scale. And that's why it's called multi-cluster. It's not a one cluster. It automatically create another cluster for you. Again, that comes with a price and you will be charged for that. For the tooling, you get a lot of integration, like you can integrate with Tableau, Chart.io. So it's purely data warehouse as a service. It's purely elastic. Storage is separate from compute. And now the connection. So what I was currently showing was a web-based user interface. This is mostly used during the development by data engineers and data architects. Then you have also command line clients like SnowSQL. If you want to automate some of the features, you can use that command line clients. Then the ODBC, JDBC drivers are basically for those environments where that doesn't have native connectors. Like for Java, Python, Spark, we have native connectors. So if you want to develop in those languages, we can use that. But if say a specific language doesn't have a native connector, then we can use the ODBC or the JDBC driver. And then the third party connectors are those ETL tools like Informatica, ThoughtSpot, and those. So they have ready-made connectors created by them for the Snowflake that we can directly integrate with. So it can query data, or Snowflake can provide some data to it for say Tableau and display some visualization of the data. So yeah, that's it.